Good evening, it's 6 PM, January 25th, 2022. I'd like to open the zoning board of appeals meeting for this evening. I'd like to announce that this is a live as well as virtual/remote meeting. It is being televised live on local channel 18. I want to thank everybody for their patience ahead of time as we get used to another new format. Okay, we must insist that there be a 1-minute time limit for butter remote discussions because there's only 2 phone lines for people to call in and they have to hold. I understand that the standard with the ZBA meetings for other towns on the Cape is the same. Okay, the call-in phone number for our butters is 508-539-1400, extension 8585. And 2 things to help the meeting go a little smoother. I think it's best if you raise your hand to be recognized to speak and to mute your phone when others are speaking. Okay, Bill Blaisdell and Jim Gould are joining us remotely via Zoom, and the rest of the staff and board are here at Town Hall. So if we could all rise, we'll say the Pledge of Allegiance for us that are here. I pledge of allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay. Charlie Reddy and Brad Pitsley are absent tonight, but all of our regular board members are present. So sitting on our hearing will be our 5 regular board members. Sharon, would you read the first 2 new hearings?
18 Wilson Grove. Owners Laurie and Joseph Manicelli request a special permit under 174-17.1 of the zoning bylaws to raise and replace a single-story, 3-bedroom dwelling and replace it with a new non-conforming code-compliant 3-bedroom home on property located in a Pompanesett District overlay and R3 zoning district, map 118, parcel 72, Mashpee, Mass. 18 Wilson Grove. Owners Laurie and Joseph Manicinelli request a variance under 174-31 of the zoning bylaws to vary the height requirement to allow for the raise and replace of a single-family residence on property located in the Pompanesett Overlay District in R3 zoning district, map 118, parcel 72, Mashpee, Mass.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, for the record, Kevin Corain. I represent the Mancinellis in connection with 2 applications that are before the board this evening. I have reviewed the board's file and took note of the fact that there was some information in the file prepared by various department heads within the town suggesting that the height variance be something that should not be granted. That, quite frankly, was a discussion that I had with my clients many months ago. Notwithstanding the fact that I believe that there is a rational basis for asking for that kind of relief, it appears to me that it would make no sense at this point, given those comments that were made by the various department heads in connection with the variance request for the height of the building. So I've asked my clients to revisit the design of the structure so that it conforms to the 30-foot height restriction that is applicable in the overlay district, and would request that this matter be continued to February 9th, at which point we hope to have that revised plan so that I would at that time be able to withdraw the request for variance relief.
Okay, Ron, would you like to make a motion?
What was that? What date again? Do you want?
February 9th.
I'd like to make a motion that we approve the applicant of 18 Wilson Grove's attorney's request to an extension up and until February 9th, 2022, on said request of variance and raise and replace.
Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, Scott seconds, so let's do a roll call vote. So, Scott, how do you vote?
Yes.
And Ron, how do you vote?
Yes.
And Bill, how do you vote?
Yeah.
And Jim Gould, how do you vote?
Yes.
And I vote yes.
Thank you very much. We'll see you all on February 9th.
Couple of weeks.
Here we go.
Wise decision, Counselor.
It would have been nice if we knew a little earlier.
Yeah, it would have been. I'm only speaking as one
Hold on,
person.
We're not done yet.
Stay here, I stay here.
We're not done.
If I go home, I go home, spend 10 minutes and come back.
Okay,
Stay there.
so we have, well, before we do that,
Take off.
is your question regarding,
It's just a question regarding participation by Zoom.
okay,
If,
you would, state your name and address.
my name is Robert Senville. I live at 14 Fireside Drive in Barrington, Rhode Island. My wife owns a property at 20 Wilson's Grove.
Okay,
And the only thing, we did drive in from Rhode Island. We understand there's a request for continuance, which, and the board has granted, which we have no problem with, of course. I just want to know if we have to drive back in, or if my wife she wants to listen, and if need be, make a statement. And is she allowed to do that by Zoom, on a Zoom call?
not on a Zoom, but you can call in. The Zoom is unfortunately only for board members that can't make it in.
Okay. So during the hearing, she could observe by Zoom and call in?
Yeah, and she can also write an email to us, and we'll read it into the record.
Okay. Okay, well, we don't know, we want to hear the presentation before we, okay. But thank you very much.
Any other questions regarding this or comments?
Yeah, that's true.
Okay. So I guess we're all set with that. Let's move on to other business, Sharon.
I'd like to make a motion, move to approve January 12th, 2021 meeting minutes.
Okay, Jim Gould seconds. I think we can do this easy. All in favor, say aye and raise your
Aye.
hand. Aye. Okay, I don't have any additional topics. Does anybody else? Chris does.
I didn't know if you wanted to discuss the email I sent out about possibly having an article on the town meeting to amend what it is it's recently come to light that someone, and Mr. Corain, you may want to stay for this, there's a case going on, and one of the things is that they took issue with setback and lot coverage and saying basically you can't use floodplain. And the way the bylaw is written, it says your 50-foot setback, your lot coverage, all this, anything considered a wetland due to, Mass General Law, Chapter 131, Section 40, you have to adhere to. So how the last hearing, we did a top of bank, the 50-foot setback for the pool. It's saying if the lot's in floodplain, you're gonna be set back from floodplain. So if your whole lot's in floodplain, you can't be set back from it. So what it is if you read the terms on what defines a wetland, a coastal wetland includes land subject to flooding. So the entire Pompanesett neighborhood is land subject to
But
flooding.
you're not talking about lot coverage, right? You're talking about setback from a wetland.
From
We-
a wet-
So we
wetland.
tried to amend this 50-foot setback from wetland.
No, it's not. This isn't wetland. What it is it's setback from anything Chapter 131.
Which is a wetland.
But floodplain is considered a wetland, even if it's high and dry.
Understood, yes?
So, in other words, if you, yeah.
You're absolutely correct.
You know what I mean? So, what it is how someone comes in, they're in a floodplain.
Yeah.
Say this lot that's just coming in right now.
Yeah?
That has to be 50 feet
Has to
from a
come to us for
wetland.
variance.
And so they can't be 50 feet because they are a wetland.
See, we tried to amend that, though, correct me if I'm wrong, 2 or 3 town meetings ago, and it included that aspect of it. And we tried to amend and say, hey, if conservation approved it, they don't need to come to us.
But
And we got blown out and we couldn't do it, remember?
pass these
More
around.
critical,
Let me,
more critical than that is the issue relative to lot coverage. If you have a vacant lot in Pompanesett now, a vacant lot, or even a built-upon lot, and it's in the floodplain, you are entitled to 0 lot coverage.
Where does it say that?
It says it right in the bylaw.
It says in the bylaw that you cannot count floodplain?
That's correct.
I didn't see that, I read it. I
It
didn't
says
see that.
water or wetlands as defined under the Wetland Protection Act 130-140 cannot be counted for determination as to what constitutes lot coverage.
what it is, Ron, is
I didn't read it that way.
you can come up and you're 10 feet above at Pompanesett, you're 10 feet above sea level, you got a beautiful sandy lot. But the floodplain's 13, so you can't use that land at all.
See, I didn't read it
Even
that
if
way,
it only
Kevin.
floods once every 20 years?
Yeah,
Correct.
Because it's saying.
Even 100 years.
your
Once every
setback-
100 years.
Your setback
Or
is
whatever the
from
number is.
a wetland as defined in
Now,
chapter
we're not talking about
131.
setback from wetlands, we're
No, we're
talking
not.
about lot coverage.
That's correct.
You're saying.
You
you're
look at
just-
that footnote, in the bylaw, and I know that the board has always interpreted water or wetlands to be water or wetland.
Right.
And have not basically considered upland as part of that calculation. But technically, an argument can be made because it references 13140, the Wetland Protection Act, and land subject to whatever it is, tidal action or coastal stormwater flowage, which is basically the floodplain.
So I must not have
cannot
read
be
the footnote
counted.
then, because when I read it, I did not see or interpret the fact that it was a floodplain could not be utilized as lot coverage square footage.
Well, that's because
way the footnote
that's because
is-
you'd have to know what chapter 13140.
Well, I do, I do. I
Right.
mean, that's the Wetlands Act, I get it, but I understand that, but I didn't think, I didn't think through it that way.
Even our Conservation Commission doesn't consider, while they take jurisdiction
Well-
over it, they don't consider it water or
When I
wetland.
showed it to them, they agreed with me,
Yeah, yeah.
and they said, yeah,
They
it
just want to
is.
change the wording, take it to town, so we can
It's a
change the
problem.
bylaw.
If you
What
took
I
out
did was
131,
So it doesn't
if
include.
you took out
I-
the reference to 13140,
I took the
then,
definition
Right.
and showed what, so it's obviously considered a wetland, it's floodplain.
Well, I'm gonna
Then
read
I
that
went
when
through
we
the
do.
bylaw, and I showed you, what I do is put wetland as defined, chapter 131, section 40, except upland land subject to flooding. And that's all you'd have to change. And there's about 3 or 4 places you'd have to change it.
I think that's what.
And it would bail you out of, some decisions you've made that may be under appeal.
When was the
Because
last
that's-
zoning
Pretty much
bylaw
every
that we
home-
obtained from the town for our,
That's
for
built in
our?
a flood zone,
Yeah,
They should
It's a
replace.
replace.
subject to.
When was
The
it?
only one since I've been.
So I've got an old 18
11,
book, so
12,
the only
13,
from
it's all gonna
18
be
has been the
subject to.
raise and replace?
yeah.
and if the board might be amenable to it, the articles
Mine's
have to
18.
be in by
Yeah.
February 14th.
They're gonna be in, did you hear it, Johnny?
Bylaws have to be in by February 14th, and I could write it with, if the board
I'm
would
with you.
support it,
Yeah.
because it would
Need
be
to vote on
coming
that?
from the board.
Do we need a vote on that?
We do need a vote, but I think it has to be on the agenda.
Yeah.
So, but
February 9th.
we would entice you to move forward with that, right? And so that we could vote.
So you're meeting prior to the 14th.
We are.
So this would give you also time to look at it and see what you think.
So what's
I
the
missed
next
that.
meeting, the 9th? Why don't we put it on the agenda for the 9th?
This was something that came
Great
up
idea.
through town council on something, and so I.
So Chris writes it up, we can look at it for next meeting.
Well, we'll have to
and then we
vote
can-
on
then-
it, and
Then we
then
can
we'll
vote
go
on
from
it
there.
then.
Yeah, I'll
But
have it,
it'll all be
I'll
written
have
up
it
in-
ready.
Of course, I'm sure it has to go to town council.
Yeah, and I'll do it through,
Does that give enough time? If we
Well,
approve it, is there any kind of appeal process?
I
or
think
anything?
after the 14th, council reviews everything. But I could write it with Evan, and he's,
But is it gonna be ready for you if, isn't it a 20, doesn't it have to fall in the 20-day, does that have to fall in 20-day appeal after we vote on it?
no, it just gets into the town meeting as an article. If the
If
article,
I can make a recommendation, you pass it by Drew McManus.
he can continue, put him in the email, but I will. I'll
Perfect,
talk-
because being
That's
on the
why I
commission,
included
right,
him.
he's the conservation agent, to make sure he's happy with it.
Yeah, but I told Caitlin, and Drew wasn't in the office when I went down, but I was gonna follow up with him, but I put him in the email chain, So he'd be on, get him on board with it so you understand it. But it's something that's just more of cleaning up
Some
to make
wording.
it the way it's always been interpreted. So,
Very good.
Thank you for the plug, very nice, well done.
yeah. Well, it was
It's great,
just,
yeah, we have them around, isn't it?
I saw her
I'm
email
impressed.
followed out, and that's why I wanted you to stay, because you may have it.
Well, I'm familiar with the case because we're defending the case.
Yeah.
You are.
There you go.
So I am familiar with the argument that is being made by the abutter.
But you are correct in your prior statement that this board has historically, correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Chairman, has not
That's
depicted it
correct.
that way.
The board has always interpreted it as being wet, whether it's water or whether it's marsh or something along those lines. I've never, ever interpreted the bylaw to include floodplain, because these maps are changing all the time. Now, probably 3/4 of the town may be in a floodplain for all
All
practical
of
purposes.
Pompanesett Island.
So, I mean, you may have a vacant lot of, a half a
Most
mile
of New
away from the
Seabury,
water, a mile
most of
away
New
from the
Seabury.
water, that could be
All the
floodplain.
area
Well,
of
and I don't
South
want to
Cape
get off
Beach,
subject, but the
Jacob
same thing
Pond,
with an
Little
air
Fort,
conditioner. and
all that area.
Same thing, because everybody, you asked, I looked in my neighborhood, there would be a bunch of people looking for variances in this room, almost everybody in my neighborhood.
I mean, I don't see under any stretch of the imagination that constitutes a structure, but,
That'd be a tough one.
that's.
I'd be looking for a variance, because I have an air conditioner and a generator in my setback.
Most people probably would.
Yeah.
But
My
they're-
neighborhood's full of them.
They're a piece of
You
equipment.
have it probably in the same thing.
I got a generator that's about five feet from
Well, I
the
mean,
line.
most of them are a piece of equipment, and they are movable.
Board members
People
can
say, well,
relation.
you attach to the building. Well, you can attach to the building, but you can move it. You just get a longer pipe to connect it or
Exactly
whatever.
right.
Come in from a different side of the building, whatever. So
I
it's
was
all-
just looking,
It's on a concrete platform.
Exactly.
That's movable.
And
I would bet you
it's not-
30-40% of the people in this town's house, their houses would not be in compliance if that was a structure.
Wouldn't be surprised. Wouldn't be surprised.
I didn't, when I emailed out, I don't know if I had your son in this, in the email from when I emailed to John. and
He's aware of
Dad.
it, though, because I've raised the issue, and in fact, I've prepared an email to Evan suggesting that that's a bylaw that should be looked at, as well as the height bylaw in connection with development in floodplains.
You're not gonna get me and Evan to agree on that, but, nice try. But
Well, I
I
mean,
think that amendment's simple.
I mean, if you've got buildings in velocity zones, and it makes sense to raise the buildings out of velocity zones and raise them out of floodplains for purposes of potential damage to abutting properties in the event of a flood, there has to be some consideration for having a building that might exceed what the height limitation
Oh, I
is.
see, because you're
You
going
would-
up that 6, 7, 8, 10
Yeah, I
feet
mean, it
you
Wouldn't
had.
that change the average grade, though? Couldn't you figure out a way to change the average grade?
No.
If you raised up in the flood zone?
So you're saying whatever you add here, you want to
Changing
add
the
up there? You want to add to the top what you're taking
No,
out
I'm
of the bottom?
saying, yeah, if the objective is to lift buildings out of floodplains, and I believe you weren't here for the discussion that we had a couple of weeks ago, where we discussed that, the primary purpose of lifting the building was to get it out of the floodplain, because the town gets rated by the federal flood insurance program.
Yeah.
And that rating depends upon how they allow buildings to be constructed, either in or out of a flood zone. Okay, so if you lift the buildings out of the flood zone, then arguably you're lifting the building above an elevation that would subject it to damage or destruction in the event of a storm, which not only protects that building.
Reduces the insurance
But protects all the buildings around it, and the federal government will continue and insure, and the rates are based upon how the towns are rated. So, I mean, everybody wants to move their buildings out of floodplains now, because the cost of insurance is significantly higher if you're building in the floodplain versus above the
But
floodplain.
it can push you out of the height limit.
I think the
But
height-
that gets you
the
up.
height
But
limit
limits your
doesn't
design.
care about floodplain.
Limits your
I think it's
design.
more for character.
But
But the
it,
negative side of that, Kevin, though, is look at the, I mean, if you have to lift it up 8 feet, you're adding another story. All of a sudden, my God, that's a tall building, when you consider also that 8 feet. That's a tall building.
If you did that in Pompanesett, can you imagine what that would do to
There aren't that many-
the character of,
there aren't that many
Pompanesett?
buildings, The elevation in Pompanesett ranges from 10, I think 13
Yeah, but
maybe
what
the
will it
highest.
be in 10 years
Wow.
from now? Or 20 years from now?
I mean, Pompanesett Island did one. The guy, the owner raised the lot to get it out of the flood zone, and it passed. I mean, it obviously passed, but I don't know
But
if
it's a lot
unique
easier, if
situation.
you've got that kind of a scenario, it's a lot easier to deal with it if it's at 35 feet as opposed to 30 feet.
Yes, that's a big difference.
30 feet is a significant limitation
Yeah.
on the height of the building, if you're trying to raise that building out of a
So are you,
out
are
of a
you,
floodplain.
are you recommending going to 35 if you have to raise?
I'm just recommending that the height bylaw be looked at for development in
For a
those
variance,
areas
for a variance.
where you're trying to get, where
I
you're
see.
trying to get a building out of a
I mean,
floodplain.
Pompanesett Beach, that area is pretty flat, so to raise a house up, you'd have to build like a retaining wall system around the house to get it up, because most of the lots there are pretty flat.
Well, you could build it on pilings.
Yeah, but the house, the first floor would be sticking way out of the ground, so I mean, you'd have to have some.
Well, even
kind
out there,
Exactly.
13 feet is the highest elevation out there, right, Pompanesett?
The whole thing's.
Yeah, but it's not like there's a slope lot where you can, or a hole you can fill it in to get it out of it.
Well, you
like
can't
in other
even,
situations.
you can't even do that, because under the bylaw, it has to be from existing grade, so filling. Well, I suppose if you filled it beforehand, but if you
Well,
would.
what did the
Before you
guy-
applied for the permit? There you go. There you go.
you
Well,
know,
I don't
but
know
it's-
what the one in Pompanesett Island, that real big house on the left that, I don't wanna say his name, because I don't know if I should. But it's, I don't know if you did it or not, it's like 3/4 of the way down, he's a developer, and he got the house out of the flood zone, they filled the lot. But he kept at the street level the same, it was a sloping lot. But he did it somehow that he was able to get it up, and he's not in the flood zone anymore.
Yeah, so I'm not sure, I mean, and I'm sure the height,
He brought in hundreds of yards.
I think I remember that house going in.
yeah.
I don't go up there that often.
It's a
but I
big
remember.
house, it's a
I
very,
think there,
very
I
large
think there was
house.
an abutter that appealed that one too, which I think we ended up being successful, but,
The abutter appealed, he didn't like the pool cabana location next to his property.
yeah,
That
but
was
that,
his
that
issue.
lot, as you know.
It was a
sloped-
sloping, yes.
Sloped significantly from where the building was down to the street, you know?
Yes.
So that may have had something to do with the,
But he definitely
The average
got the house out of the flood zone.
Yep.
In his pool, I think, too.
I think the Pompanesett, though, the height was a trade-off where they gave him 5% more coverage.
Right.
So
But
you
that-
get
but that's-
25%.
Character
but
of the neighborhood.
I don't agree
And
with
that
that
was
either, because that height bylaw was changed.
a law.
That height bylaw was changed maybe 30 years ago, okay?
Yes.
Because I was involved in a permitting situation where a building was approved on Shore Road, and everybody complained, and they said, we think it's a 3-story building. So a bunch of the neighbors got together, if my memory serves me correctly, and as I get older, it fails me, but I believe they got together and developed this idea that 30 feet made sense out there and not 35. The 25%, if I recall correctly, has only come in within the last,
2 years.
Yeah,
yeah.
that's a new one.
I mean, that's a new one. You know, that.
I think it came in the same day as the raise and replace.
Yeah, and that 30 foot happened years and years ago.
But when they did the third, they also had the 25 from the street instead of 40.
That's a setback, yeah.
Yeah, they changed that,
But
too.
it was the lot coverage, they changed the lot coverage to 25% as opposed to 20.
Yeah, that was recently.
I mean, I've had some conversation with Evan where he's thought it might be a good idea soon to maybe have some sort of joint meeting with the planner, myself, and zoning board members, and Pompanesett people, to come up with something that puts everyone on a level playing field. So it's, because there's probably a lot of people who don't want their character in the neighborhood to get ruined.
Well, I mean, don't we have as a board the right to give them a variance to go over the 30 feet if it's a situation where they had to get it out of the flood zone? Do we have the right to do that?
Well, you know, it's the same 3 things for a variance, right?
Hardship. Is that a hardship?
Hardship based on 3 things: topography, shape, and soil condition.
The soil condition would be flood zone, wouldn't it?
Well, topography, I think you'd get into the
Well, you
issue.
could argue anything,
You
I
could-
guess,
I think you'd argue
right?
None of them would hold up in court, but I mean, they'd all be, there's no hardship, the hardships based on that. I mean, the lot's the same
I
as
mean,
every lot in the neighborhood. It's,
I mean,
They're all the same,
they're
they're
all
all
in the same
square and
floodplain.
flat,
They're all-
some of them are, on
there's
Wilson
nothing
Road,
unique.
they're probably the smallest lots
Yeah,
in the
small lots.
state, I
Yeah.
would
yeah,
guess.
that-
2,000 square.
Personally, I don't know why you'd
foot
ever want
lot.
to live in that street.
Well, when zoning
that?
came in, you
Personally, I
couldn't
don't know
be
why
smaller
you'd
than
ever want
50
to live
by
in that
100.
street.
And they were all
That's
50 by
my-
40
That's
by
what
90.
tent lots, they used to rent
Yeah.
them,
It was a tent, it was tents, yes.
right, they put tents on.
I don't know,
Right.
you can't even, if you get furniture delivered, they can't get down the road.
Right. But there's a difference too. I mean, the other thing that you have to look at too, in terms of, there are significant changes in elevations on that road. Okay, so you may
Big-
have.
big
you-
time.
You may have some lots that are 3 or 4 feet below other lots. So let's
The
say.
one at the top of the hill is probably 8 feet.
So you could build a house 35 feet,
But he's
and it
gonna
would be
be-
no higher than the one next door that's built at an elevation of 10
Than the
as
higher
opposed to
one,
an elevation of 5.
I guess you'd have to take the average, if you could prove that the average in the neighborhood, what everybody's height is, and say, I'm 35, I'm going to 33, but I'm not higher than this guy down the street. That's an argument.
Around all night.
Those are the issues.
Because I know we have that
We
setback
could-
thing with the street,
I'm gonna make a
that
phone
if you can
call.
show the abutters, take the average of the abutters, if they're closer to the street, then
Right.
you're
Maybe
okay.
we should,
This is the
Same
kind of
thing with
discussion
height.
we should have over a beer or a bourbon.
exactly.
Can't have the discussion over a beer.
Sounds good.
All right, George, would you like to make a motion to close this?
Like to make a motion that we adjourn tonight's meeting.
Second.
Oh, I was gonna let,
Sharon seconds,
Wait,
all in
I was
favor,
waiting
say
for
aye.
Jim.
Aye.
Aye.
I was waiting for Jim.
Good night, everybody.